I found the hotel receipt tucked inside my son's backpack, my own name printed neatly beside another woman's. For a long moment, the hallway felt too quiet, as if the house itself was waiting to hear what I'd do next. And when I finally asked my son why he helped his father, he wouldn't look at me. Nora lives in a modest house at the edge of town, raising her teenage son, Liam, while her husband, Scott, works long shifts that have slowly stretched into overnight absences. Their marriage has grown quiet, shaped more by routine than affection. Nora has learned to live inside the silence, trusting the small moments with her son to keep the family whole. But the night, she finds a hotel charge she never made, paired with a young woman listed beside her name. Something inside her shifts. Nora realizes she has been missing pieces of her own story, and her son might be the one holding them. The receipt was folded so neatly it almost looked intentional, like someone had taken time smoothing the edges before hiding it beneath a stack of school papers. I only meant to gather the laundry from Liam's desk chair, but the slip of paper slid onto the floor with a kind of soft insistence. It landed face up. My name was the first thing I saw, printed there, bold as a confession, next to a young woman's signature I didn't recognize. For a moment, the house went still around me. Even the old wall clock seemed to hold its breath. I bent slowly, feeling the ache in my knees, feeling something deeper ache behind my ribs. The hotel name shimmered faintly in the afternoon light. A single night, paid in cash. Liam's messy handwriting scrawled on the back. Dad said hurry. I stood there staring, the dust motes turning in the sun like tiny, indifferent witnesses. Footsteps thudded in the hallway. Liam's, always heavier than he realized. He pushed the door halfway open, then froze when he saw the receipt in my hand. His voice broke first, thin as a thread. Mom, that's nothing. Really? He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared at the carpet, like a child expecting scolding, though he wasn't a child anymore. 16 years old, taller than me, but somehow smaller in that doorway. I didn't speak. Not yet. Silence has its own weight, and I could feel him shrinking beneath it. He cleared his throat. I was just helping Dad. It wasn't. His voice cracked again. It wasn't what you think. The way he said helping made something cold slip down my spine. Liam had never been good at lying. His shoulders curled inward. His hands moved restlessly at his sides, squeezing and releasing, like he wanted to hold onto a truth he was terrified to say aloud. I held the receipt between us. She signed her name above mine. I whispered. Why? His face tightened, a quick flinch he tried to hide, but couldn't. He shook his head, a tiny, helpless motion. Mom, please. I don't want to talk about it. The room dimmed as a cloud passed over the sun, shadows drifting across his face. And in the quiet, I heard the sound beneath his words. Not guilt. Not even defiance. Fear. I stepped back, giving him room, though part of me wanted to hold him by the shoulders and force the truth into the light. But that never works. Not with children. Not with husbands. Sometimes the truth hides in places no hands can reach. He sank onto the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, his palms pressing into his forehead. Dad said you'd get upset, he murmured. He said you always jump to conclusions. The sting of that landed deeper than I wanted it to. My throat tightened. Did I jump? I asked quietly. Or is there somewhere you don't want me to land? He didn't answer. He only breathed, slow and shaky, like he was counting the seconds between us. I sat beside him, leaving a small gap, just enough for air, not enough for distance. Liam, look at me. For a long time, he didn't. And then he did, just briefly. His eyes were rimmed with something that wasn't quite tears, but wasn't strength either. Something in between. You don't understand, Mom, he said, almost pleading. Dad needed me. He said it was important. He said you'd make it worse. There it was again. That quiet tightening in my chest. The familiar echo of blame whispered softly enough to disguise itself as care. I had lived with that kind of tone for years, so quiet it never broke windows, but loud enough to break trust. I placed the receipt gently on the blanket between us. Is this what he needed you for? Liam's jaw trembled. He said she was a friend, that he didn't want anyone thinking the wrong thing, that using your name would protect us. Protect us. I felt the words settle into my body like cold water. Outside the window, a crow landed on the fence, shaking droplets from its wings. The sky was starting to bruise toward evening. I watched the light fade, letting the quiet wrap around us. Liam, I said softly, did it feel like protecting? He swallowed, looked away. His voice dropped so low, I barely heard it. I didn't want to, but he said he'd be disappointed if I didn't help. He said I was the only one he could trust. The air left my lungs in a slow, aching rush. It wasn't the hotel. It wasn't even the woman. It was the shape of the lie he'd carved our son into. I reached out, fingertips brushing his shoulder. You don't owe your father secrets. He blinked hard. But I owe him everything. He said so. The room felt smaller then, as if the walls were inching inward. As if the house itself had heard something it wished it hadn't. He stood abruptly, pacing to the dresser. His hands shook as he gripped the edge. I didn't want to hurt you, Mom. I swear. I just didn't know what else to do. I rose slowly. You tell me, I whispered. That's what else you do. He tightened his jaw, a storm passing behind his eyes. Dad said you'd say that. Of course he did. Manipulation always rehearses itself. A long silence stretched between us, thin and breakable. Liam turned toward the window, pressing his forehead lightly to the glass. His breath fogged the pain in soft, uneven clouds. He said if you found out, everything would fall apart. I stepped closer, my voice barely more than breath. Maybe he's the one afraid of falling. Liam didn't move, but his shoulders eased the smallest bit, like he had been carrying something heavy for too long. I left the receipt on his bed. I didn't need to hold it anymore. Its weight had already settled inside me. When I reached the doorway, he finally spoke again, quiet, trembling. Mom, please don't tell him I told you anything. I turned back. He still faced the window, his reflection faint and ghost-like against the darkening sky. I won't, I said. But Liam, this isn't over. Not for either of us. The house creaked softly, as if acknowledging the truth. And while the sun dipped fully behind the horizon, I felt the first cold thread of a certainty I wasn't ready to say aloud. My husband had asked our son to carry his lies. And now I had to decide whether I would carry them too. The bell above the hotel door chimed the way a fragile thing does when it knows it's about to witness something heavy. I stepped inside with my coat still damp from the morning fog, pretending I belonged in a place that smelled of lemon polish and secrets. The receptionist looked up, offering the polite smile they must give to every stranger, but something about the stillness in the lobby told me she already sensed why I was there. My fingers gripped the counter, the edges cool against my skin. I slid the receipt forward, the ink faint but unmistakable, my name printed beside another woman's. The clerk blinked, hesitation flickering across her face like a light struggling to stay on. And for a moment, the whole hotel felt as if it held its breath. I cleared my throat, though my voice still felt borrowed. I just wanted to check if this charge is correct. She studied the paper as though it might burn her. Then she nodded slowly. It's accurate, she said. Mrs. Hayes checked in with Mr. Hayes 3 nights ago. My name rolled off her tongue too easily, too confidently, as if she had seen me stand in that lobby with him before. But I hadn't. A small cough caught in her throat. Except the woman with him was younger. The pause between her words hit harder than the words themselves. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want them. The mind is a cruel enough storyteller on its own. The hallway behind her stretched into dimness, narrow and pressed tight with doors that had heard more stories than they deserved. I imagined the sound of their footsteps, his familiar stride, her lighter one, echoing down that carpeted corridor. The clerk handed the receipt back, but my hand didn't move to take it. It felt heavier than before, as if it carried a truth I wasn't ready to hold. When I finally stepped outside, the air tasted different. The world looked the same, cars passing, birds tracing quiet arcs in the sky, but something inside my chest felt pulled taut, like a thread someone had been tugging for too long. I walked slowly across the parking lot, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. Every sound felt magnified. Even the wind seemed to whisper things I'd tried not to imagine. Scott hadn't used his own name. He'd used mine. And that thought pressed harder than the idea of another woman. Because names carry weight, doors they open, permissions they grant, trust they steal when misused. Why did he need mine? As I reached my car, a fragment of memory surfaced. Liam standing in his doorway the night before, shoulders curled inward, words tumbling out too quickly. "It's nothing important, Mom." Just like the clerk hesitated. Just like Scott always did when truth scratched at the surface. I sank into the driver's seat, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The hotel glass reflected my face. Older than I remembered, softer around the eyes, tired in ways I didn't yet understand. Somewhere inside that reflection was a woman who believed her family had cracks, but not fractures. Now, I wasn't so sure. The engine hummed, a low, steady sound grounding me in a moment that felt far from steady. I stared at the receipt again. My name, printed plainly beside another signature, almost mocking in how normal it appeared. A paper could lie quietly. A marriage couldn't. A son shouldn't. The hotel sat behind me like a question I wasn't ready to answer. I eased the car into motion, the tires murmuring against the road, carrying me back toward a home that suddenly felt unfamiliar. As I drove, the thought kept circling, soft but persistent, like a whisper tugging at the edge of a door. Scott could have checked in under any name. Why mine? The farther I got from the hotel, the more the question felt less like betrayal and more like warning. And by the time my house came into view, I realized something colder, something I didn't want to believe. This wasn't about infidelity. This was about identity. And somewhere between the man I married and the son I raised, someone was holding a truth I wasn't meant to find. But I had found it. And now nothing, not the house, not the air, not the people inside it, felt the same. What else had they signed in my name? The forks on the table made the tiniest sounds when they touched the plates, but somehow each one felt louder than the last. The curtains breathed with the evening wind, rising and falling, like a chest trying to steady itself. That was the moment I noticed it, Liam's eyes flicking to the door again, almost as if someone stood behind it waiting for him to move. He wasn't eating, just tracing circles along the rim of his plate, pale fingers trembling against the porcelain. He jumped a little when I said his name. Not loudly, not sharply. Just his name. But he flinched as though he expected it to hurt. I set my fork down. It barely made a sound. The room felt thick, like the air had been sitting too long without anyone daring to breathe. The overhead light hummed softly, casting a dull glow over the table. There was nothing unusual about dinner, just the two of us and a quiet house, but something in the space between us had shifted. "Liam," I said again, softer. "What's wrong?" He swallowed. His gaze didn't lift. Instead, it sank further, drifting toward his lap like the truth was hiding in the folds of his jeans. The boy I raised, the one who used to tell me every secret no matter how small, looked suddenly like a stranger trying to remember how to speak. His shoulders tensed, then untensed. A slow, unsteady breath left him. He asked me for help, he whispered. The room tilted. Not physically, but in the way a memory can tilt a person, how a few words can rearrange the ground beneath your feet without warning. "Who?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He finally lifted his eyes, and they were redder than I expected, as if he had been crying earlier. Or trying very hard not to. "Dad," he said. The fork beside my plate seemed heavier than iron. For a moment, I didn't touch anything. I didn't even blink. Something in my chest tightened, not like pain, but like recognition. A quiet dread I had tried to silence for years. "What kind of help?" I asked. Liam's fingers tightened around the napkin in his lap. He twisted it until it nearly tore. He wanted me to run an errand, he murmured, voice barely above a breath. To pick something up. Even before he said the next words, they hovered in the air, sharp, waiting. A room key. My heart stuttered. I stared at him, not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. Scott had stayed out late many times before. He always had an explanation ready, polished and easy. But this was different. A room key. An errand involving our son. My name printed on a receipt I never touched. My throat felt tight. Why did he need you to get it? Liam wiped at his forehead with the back of his hand. He looked so young in that moment. Too young to be carrying a secret like this. They wouldn't give it to him, he said. They needed the wife on file. My name. My identity. Used like a key to open a door I never walked through. Liam continued, the words tumbling out in uneven pieces. He just told me to say I was picking up the key for you. That you would be there soon. I didn't know anything else, I swear. Dad said he needed me. And he never asks me for anything. I nodded slowly. Not because I accepted it, but because he needed the space to keep talking. The window beside us rattled with a passing gust, leaves scraping quietly against the glass. The floor creaked beneath my chair, like it recognized the weight settling into my bones. Did you see her? I asked. Liam froze. For a moment he didn't breathe. Then he gave a small, helpless shake of his head. No. I only handed the key to Dad in the parking lot. He said the room was already set up. That she was waiting. She. The word felt like smoke in the air, something meant to dissipate, but lingering too long. I leaned back, letting the wooden chair hold me. My hands rested on my lap, fingers curling unconsciously into the fabric of my dress. Across from me, Liam looked like he wanted to disappear into the pattern of the wallpaper. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I asked softly. He flinched again, so slight I almost missed it. I thought it was just work stuff, he said. And I thought if I told you, you'd be disappointed. The truth hovered in the center of the table, between the cold potatoes and the untouched bread, pulsing like a quiet heartbeat. I wanted to reach for him, to take his hand, to tell him none of this was his fault. But something inside me held still. Not anger, not betrayal. Something deeper, something older. Fear. Not fear of a girl in a hotel room. Fear of the kind of man Scott might be when no one is watching. Liam's gaze drifted once more to the door, like he expected his father to walk in at any moment and reclaim the truth before it could be spoken. The clock in the kitchen ticked, each second landsliding into the next. Nora, he whispered, using my name instead of Mom. I didn't know. I didn't know what it meant. I just wanted to help him. His voice cracked on that last word, help. I felt the walls of the dining room fold inward, not collapsing, but bending around the moment like they were listening. It's all right, I said. The lie tasted like metal. You didn't do anything wrong. But Liam didn't look relieved. He looked like someone waiting for the next question. The one I wasn't sure I wanted to ask. Liam, I murmured. Did your father tell you who she was? He hesitated. A long, trembling pause. Then, no. But he said she reminded him of someone. My skin chilled. Who? He swallowed hard. Of you, he said. When you were younger. The room exhaled around us, slow and heavy. Outside, the wind shifted. The porch light flickered. And somewhere deep inside the house, a floorboard creaked, like something or someone remembering an old truth. I looked at my son, this boy caught between protecting his father and seeking help from his mother, and realized the question clawing at my chest wasn't about the girl. It was about the man who needed a child's loyalty to betray a woman he once loved. I touched the edge of the table, grounding myself. Liam, I whispered, there's more you're not telling me. He lifted his eyes. They shimmered with something fragile. I think Dad's scared, he said softly. Not of you. Not of the truth. Of her. A quiet beat. Why? I asked. His answer barely rose above a breath. Because she said she knows you. The house seemed to lean closer, waiting for what came next. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. And in that stillness, a single question filled the room like a shadow stretching across the floor. The candles on the dinner table flickered, as if trying to warn me before anything else could. Their little flames leaned toward the door, trembling, stretching, almost pointing at the place. Liam's eyes kept drifting. He sat across from me, shoulders hunched, fork untouched, breathing in small, uneven sips. The roasted chicken between us had already cooled, but the room felt warm, too warm, like the walls were holding their breath. I watched him pick at a thread on his sleeve.
He didn't look at me.
Not once. When I finally spoke his name, the sound of it felt too soft for the way he flinched, as though the air itself had snapped beside his ear. He muttered something about homework, about being tired, but the excuses dripped out of him like water slipping through shaking fingers. And all the while, those fearful glances toward the door. I tried to swallow around the tightening in my throat. "Liam," I whispered, "it's just us here." But even that made him shrink. For a moment the only sound was the clock behind me, ticking with a steadiness I wished I still had in my chest. Outside, the streetlight hummed, and the wind brushed the house like something trying to get in or trying to pull truth out. The boy I raised, quiet, gentle, loyal to a fault, wouldn't lie unless someone else handed him the words. Finally, he set his fork down with a trembling clink. "Mama," he whispered, I didn't want to help. He said it was just an errand." I froze. There it was, the thing he'd been swallowing whole since the moment he walked into the room. He stared at the table as though something terrible were written in the wood grain. "Dad said he forgot something at the hotel. A jacket or a wallet or... I don't know. He told me to go pick up the room key from the front desk. Said it was under your name, so they wouldn't ask questions." The room tilted. Just a little, but enough for me to feel the floor slipping somewhere beneath my ribs. My name. My name printed on a receipt beside a young woman's signature. My name spoken at a hotel desk by my son's shaking voice. I kept my hand still on the table, though a coldness crept into my fingers. "Did you ask why he needed you to do it?" I asked softly, afraid to disturb whatever truth he was tiptoeing around. He shook his head. He said he was busy. He said it was important. A pause. "He said you wouldn't understand." My breath landed in my chest like a stone. Liam pressed his palm against his forehead, pushing back tears he didn't want me to see. "I just did what he asked. I didn't think it was wrong until..." His voice cracked. "Until I saw the girl waiting by his car." A hush fell over the table, so heavy it felt like dust settling after an explosion. I leaned in slowly. "What girl, sweetheart?" He swallowed hard. "She was young. Younger than you. Maybe younger than I am now. She kept her head down, like she didn't want anyone to look at her. But Dad told her to get in. And she did." Liam's voice broke at the end, small and trembling. I felt my heart press against my ribs, not in anger, but in something quieter, something that hurt in a deeper, colder place. The kind of hurt that comes when betrayal begins to change shape, when it becomes something unfamiliar, something almost frightened. "Did she say anything?" I asked. Liam shook his head. "Just thank you. She said it to me, not him. Like I'd helped her. Like she was relieved." He paused. "But Mama," she looked scared. I sat back in my chair, letting the words settle around us like falling ash.
Fear.
Not romance. Not secrecy.
Fear.
Behind Liam's story, behind Scott's lie, something else pulsed like a warning light I didn't yet know how to read. The wind brushed against the window again, a long, low sigh. Liam's eyes followed the sound, and I could see the guilt twisting inside him like a rope. "It's not your fault," I said softly. He shook his head. "If you're hurt, it is." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. He didn't pull away. His small, warm fingers curled around mine like he was afraid I might disappear if he didn't hold on. "You are trying to be good," I whispered. "Trying to be helpful. That's all you've ever done." But inside me, something shifted, a quiet rearranging of everything I thought I knew. It wasn't just the receipt anymore. Not just my name printed beside someone else's lies. It was the way the girl had thanked my son. The way Scott had used Liam's goodness as cover. The way Liam had flinched whenever I spoke too softly. Scott taught him that silence could hurt. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady the room that still felt tilted. Liam, do you know who she was? He looked up then, finally letting his eyes meet mine. They were wet, wide, desperate. No, he whispered. But I think she needed to leave with him even less than I did. The candles flickered again, snapping softly like distant sparks. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked, the way old wood does when it remembers something it can't speak aloud. I brushed Liam's hair back, with gentle fingers. Thank you for telling me. He nodded, small and solemn. We sat like that for a while, hands joined, breathing slow. The house didn't feel warm anymore. Something had shifted in it, something quiet and watchful, something waiting for the next revelation to rise. When dinner was finally cleared away, I walked to the window and watched the empty street, the dim pools of light from each lamp. For the first time, I felt like the darkness outside wasn't just darkness. It was hiding something, or protecting something,
Or warning me. I didn't know which.
but as I stood there with my son behind me, shoulders shaking with guilt he didn't deserve, one question pressed its cold fingers against my spine. If the girl was afraid, then what did Scott drag my son into? The night held its breath. And so did I. I heard him before I saw him. A thin, broken sound leaking through the crack of his bedroom door. The kind of sound children make only when they're trying their hardest not to be heard. The house was quiet otherwise, breathing in its sleep. Even the refrigerator hummed softer, as if respecting the hour. But Liam's sobs, they were small tremors shaking the walls of a place I had always believed was safe. I pushed the door open just enough to let the hallway light spill across the floor. He was curled at the edge of his bed, knees pulled to his chest, face hidden in his hands. His shoulders rose and fell like something was tugging at him from the inside. I sat beside him without a word. The mattress dipped under my weight, and he stiffened, just for a moment, before releasing a shuddering breath. I didn't touch him. Not yet. I simply waited, listening to the quiet ache in his breathing, listening the way a mother learns to when she knows the truth is close but fragile. After a long minute, he whispered, "Mom?"
Soft. Cracked.
A voice that wasn't sure it deserved an answer. "I'm here," I said. The floor creaked like it remembered something sad. He scrubbed at his face, even though no one had asked him to stop crying. "I didn't mean to lie," he murmured. His eyes never rose to meet mine. "They said I didn't have to tell you everything, and I thought it made sense." The words sat between us, warm with guilt, cold with fear. "Liam," I said gently. "Who is they?" His hands twisted in the blanket. He looked toward the window as if the dark outside might offer him courage or an escape. When he finally spoke, the words came out as quiet as dust. The girl from the hotel. She wasn't a stranger. I didn't breathe. Not because the answer surprised me. I suppose deep down I had already known, but because of the way he said it. Like the truth itself hurt to carry. He kept his gaze on the window. He looked older in that moment. Too old for 11. "I saw her before," he continued. "With Dad." The room seemed to tilt slightly, the air bending around his confession. "When?" I asked. My voice stayed calm, but inside, something cold uncoiled. "Twice," he said. "No, 3 times. Dad said she worked with him. He said she was just tired." Tired. The word lingered in the air like steam. He swallowed, the muscles in his throat tight and trembling. "But she always looked scared," he whispered. Like she was trying not to cry in front of me. A small gust of wind rattled the window frame. For a moment, I thought I heard my own heartbeat echo inside his pause. "She asked me a question once," Liam added, barely audible. "She leaned close and said, 'Are you safe at home?'" He finally looked at me then, and his eyes were wide in a way that made him seem younger than he had just moments before. I didn't know why she asked it. I thought maybe she meant safe from you. He winced at his own words, shaking his head quickly. "No, not like that. I didn't understand."
I did.
At least more than he expected. My hands rested on my lap, holding each other because I didn't trust them not to shake. I thought of the hotel. The receipt. Scott's name beside my own, borrowed like a mask he never asked permission to wear. The hallway where the air felt too tight, too thin. The clerk's polite smile stretched over something he didn't want to say. And now, a girl. Tired. Afraid. Asking my son, my child, if he was safe at home. A coldness threaded up my spine, settling at the base of my neck. What did you say to her? I asked softly. He lifted a shaking shoulder. I said yes. Because I think I am. The last part broke something in me. Not loudly, but slowly. The kind of break that bends rather than snaps. And what did she say back? She told me. He paused to breathe, or maybe to gather courage. She told me she was glad. And then Dad told her to wait in the car. A shadow passed over his face, faint, but unmistakable. He wasn't the same with her, Liam said. He talked quiet. Too quiet. Like when he's trying not to wake you after coming home late. I closed my eyes. I knew that tone. I had lived beside it long enough to know it wasn't softness. It was calculation wearing softness like a borrowed coat. When I opened my eyes again, the room felt smaller. Mom, Liam whispered. Did I do something wrong? No, I said immediately, quietly, but with a steadiness that surprised me. You told me the truth. And the truth is never wrong. He leaned into me then, slowly, like a child unsure he's still allowed to seek comfort from the person he just confessed his confusion to. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders and felt how tightly he held himself. His heartbeat pressed against my side, quick, uneven. We sat like that for a long time. The house around us felt awake, listening through the walls. Somewhere downstairs the heater clicked on, breathing warm air into a place suddenly colder than I remembered. I brushed a hand through his hair. Liam, I said, why didn't you tell me any of this before? His answer slid out in a whisper. Because she told me not to. I stilled. What do you mean? She said, don't tell your mom. Not yet. He tightened his grip on my shirt. And she looked scared. Like something bad would happen if you knew. A quiet stretched between us. Wide, fragile, impossible to cross without breaking something important. I stared at the dark hallway outside his door. It felt like a mouth, waiting. Mom, Liam whispered, tugging at me. Why would she say that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I suddenly understood that nothing in our home, in our lives, was as simple as the version Scott had always let me see. Liam exhaled shakily and leaned closer. Mom, he murmured. I think she wanted help, but I didn't know how. A soft grief rose in my chest. Grief for the girl. Grief for my son. Grief for the life we thought we were living. I kissed the top of his head. You did exactly what you could, I said. And now I'll take care of the rest. He nodded against me, trusting me without knowing what that promise might cost. When he finally fell asleep, I stayed beside him a little longer, watching the rise and fall of his breath, listening to the quiet room, hearing echoes of a voice I had never met, asking my child if he felt safe. As I stood to leave, the floor creaked again. But this time, it didn't sound like memory. It sounded like warning. And I realized, whatever the truth was, it wasn't behind us. While the house had long gone quiet, the kind of quiet that presses its ear to your walls and listens back. I was folding a blanket on the couch when I heard it, a small, muffled sound from Liam's room, like someone trying not to be heard. At first, I thought it was the house settling, the old wood aching in its joints. But then it came again, a broken inhale, the kind a child makes when their heart has been splintered into something too delicate to name. I opened his door slowly. The hallway light barely reached him, casting only a pale line across the foot of his bed. He was turned toward the wall, shoulders trembling under the thin blanket. I didn't say anything. I just sat down on the edge of his bed, the mattress dipping gently beneath my weight. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the sound of our breathing, uneven, then steady, then uneven again. He didn't look at me when he whispered, Mom? I smoothed a hand over his hair. I'm here. Another pause. I could hear the clock in the hallway ticking, slow and patient, as though counting down to whatever truth he had been carrying. Then, with a small shudder, he turned his face toward me. His cheeks were wet, lashes spiked, the kind of crying he'd tried to hide until it hurt too much. It wasn't a stranger, he whispered. I felt something tighten in my ribs. Who wasn't? The girl. The one at the hotel. The room felt colder at those words. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The blanket in my hands suddenly felt too heavy, as though it absorbed the weight of what he was trying to say. Liam swallowed. I've seen her before. I waited. That's something motherhood teaches you, the difference between pushing for a truth and holding out your hands until a child places it there themselves. He sat up slowly, pulling his knees to his chest. Dad, he met her before. More than once. The words didn't hit me all at once. They settled like dust, filling every small space I had left inside me. She always looked tired, he continued. Not like sleepy tired. Like she hadn't rested in a long time. Like something was chasing her inside her own head. A quiet slipped into the room, heavier than before. I could hear the refrigerator humming downstairs, the wind brushing against the siding, the night stretching itself thin around our house. But none of it reached me. All I could feel was the cold working its way up my spine. Liam wiped his nose on the edge of his sleeve. One time, when Dad wasn't looking, she talked to me. My heart clenched. What did she say? He hesitated. His small fingers twisted the blanket into knots. She asked if I was safe at home. Those words, they didn't land gently. They hit the ground inside me like something falling from a great height, breaking, echoing. Safe at home. A stranger. A young woman checked into a hotel under my name. A girl Liam had met before, with my husband. And she asked my son, my child, if he was safe. I didn't realize my hands had gone cold until he reached for one, guiding it between his palms like he was trying to warm me. Mom, he whispered. Did I do something wrong? Is that why Dad got upset when she talked to me? The floor creaked softly beneath us, like the house remembered something it had kept quiet for too long. No, sweetheart, I murmured. You didn't do anything wrong. But even as I said the words, I felt an unease I couldn't name crawling along the edges of the moment. A feeling that the truth Liam had given me, as painful as it already was, wasn't even the whole shape of what had happened. I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Did she say anything else? He shook his head. She wanted to, but Dad came back too fast. He told her to wait in the car. My pulse quickened. Where were you? By the grocery store.
Dad said he needed to stop and get something.
But he didn't buy anything. I stared at him, at his small, earnest face, at the worry etched into his expression like lines he was too young to wear. And then something else, something deeper, flickered in his voice. Mom, she looked scared of him. The room dimmed around us, the shadows curling closer to the corners. It was as though the night itself leaned in to listen. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to shut him out, but to steady myself against what I already felt rising from the dark beneath his words. A truth I wasn't prepared for. A truth I had somehow lived beside, without touching its surface. When I opened them again, he was watching me with a kind of fragile hope only a child can hold, hoping I could make everything make sense. I squeezed his hand. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. His chin quivered. Are you mad at me? No, I whispered. Never at you. He nodded slowly, then leaned against me. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling his heartbeat flutter against my ribs. It reminded me of a bird caught in a storm, small, trembling, trying its best to survive the wind. We sat like that until his breathing softened, each exhale settling deeper into sleep. I laid him down gently, tucking the blanket around him the way I had when he was little. His room, once filled with quiet sobs, now held only the sound of gentle sleep. But as I stepped into the hallway, the silence shifted again. Not peaceful, not restful, watching. The lamp flickered at the end of the corridor, casting long shadows against the wallpaper. I stood there for a moment, hand over my heart, trying to breathe past the cold that had taken hold inside me. She asked my son if he was safe. That question followed me down the stairs, each step carrying a weight I wasn't ready to hold. By the time I reached the bottom, one truth had begun to take shape, a truth I couldn't ignore. Whatever Scott had pulled Liam into, whatever secrets he had asked our son to help hide, they weren't just betrayal. They were danger. And the girl, whoever she was, wasn't warning me about my husband. She was warning me about the house. I thought I knew. What else had Liam seen that he was still too afraid to say? The house had already gone still for the night when I heard it, a soft, uncertain tapping against the kitchen window. Not sharp enough to be a knock. Not loud enough to be a branch. Just a thin rhythm, like someone afraid of being heard and desperate to be answered. I stood there in the dark for a long moment, the hum of the fridge the only thing reminding me the world hadn't stopped. When I finally switched on the small stove light, its glow spilled across the room like a secret being revealed. That's when I saw her. A young woman, shoulders curled inward against the cold, her breath fogging the glass. Her scarf was gone, hair windblown, eyes wide with something that lived between fear and apology. She looked too fragile to disturb, yet too broken to ignore. I opened the door slowly. The night air pushed in first, cold, restless, carrying the smell of damp pavement. Then she stepped back, as though even my doorway belonged to someone she feared. "I didn't mean to hurt your family," she whispered. Her voice was a thin thread, pulled too tight. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand still on the doorknob because it felt like one wrong movement might shatter her. She shook her head when I gestured for her to come inside. No, I can't," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "I just need you to hear me." Behind her, the street was empty, no cars, no shadows, no sign of anyone who might have brought her here. But the way she kept glancing over her shoulder made the darkness feel crowded.
She didn't look at me.
Not fully. Just past me, toward a life she wasn't sure she deserved to speak to.
"I know what he did," she said.
"Your husband. But I swear he was trying to protect someone." The words tangled in the cold air between us. I felt them land on my skin, heavy and strange. I didn't ask who she meant. My voice was somewhere deep inside me, quiet behind the pounding in my ears. Instead, I let her keep speaking, because something in her posture, the trembling fingers, the cracked voice, told me silence would hurt her more than any question I could ask. She took a small step closer. Just one. Enough to let the porch light find her face. That's when I saw it, the exhaustion etched into the edges of her eyes. A kind of sleeplessness you can't fake. "I didn't know he'd use your name," she murmured. "I didn't know he'd ask your son to help." The floor of the porch felt unsteady beneath me, like the house itself was holding its breath. She finally raised her eyes. They weren't the eyes of someone scheming. They were the eyes of someone running. "He told me it was the only way," she said. He said it would keep him from finding me." There it was. The first real shape of the truth. Not a confession. More like a crack in a wall she'd been holding up alone. "Who?" I asked quietly. Her breath hitched. She shook her head again, this time like the answer itself was dangerous. "He watches," she whispered. "He doesn't let go." A gust of wind blew across the porch, lifting a strand of her hair. She flinched as though it were a hand reaching for her. In that moment, I realized she was younger than I'd thought. Young enough to still be learning what safety should look like. Old enough to know what losing it feels like. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, hesitant, as if the act of giving it to me might change something permanently. "He told me," she said softly, "that if anything happened, I should go to you. That you'd see the truth before he did." The he in her sentence wasn't my husband anymore. It was someone else. Someone whose presence stretched beyond the girl's small frame, casting a long shadow across my doorway. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. She swallowed. Her lips trembled. "Because Scott was afraid," she said. "Not for himself. For Liam." The night around us tightened. Every leaf on the trees seemed to hush. She tucked her hands under her elbows, as though she could warm herself with her own arms. I shouldn't stay, she whispered. If he sees me here, he'll think Scott told you everything.
He.
I repeated. She took a step backward onto the porch steps, her foot slipping slightly on the damp wood. She steadied herself without my help. You'll understand soon, she said. But your son, he didn't do anything wrong. He just believed Scott. And Scott believed, her voice faltered. He believed I wouldn't survive alone. For the first time, the girl's face twisted, not with fear, but with something like grief. Or gratitude. Or both. I'm sorry, she whispered again. For all of it. And just like that, she turned. Not running, just moving quickly enough to disappear into the dark before I could follow. Her small figure dissolved down the sidewalk until the night swallowed her whole. I stood there for a long time, the paper sheet handed me trembling in my fingers. I hadn't opened it yet. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Behind me, the house creaked. The way old houses do when they've witnessed something they shouldn't. Inside, Liam slept with the innocence of someone who doesn't yet understand the weight of secrets. Scott's empty chair at the dinner table felt colder than it should. I closed the door gently, as though noise might shatter whatever fragile truth had just walked away from my porch. And as I slid the lock into place, a question rose inside me. Quiet, persistent, unsettling. If Scott was trying to protect someone, then what exactly did he think was coming for us? Already walking toward us, the tapping began so softly I thought it was part of a dream, just a fingertip brushing the cold glass, steady, uncertain, almost polite. The house was dark except for a faint strip of hallway light reaching the kitchen like a thin hand. I stood still for a breath, listening. The tapping came again, a little sharper, a little more desperate. When I stepped closer, the window fogged with my breath, and there she was, standing in the yard with her arms wrapped around herself, hair blown across her face, scarf gone, shoulders shaking. A girl far too young to know this kind of trembling. She lifted her eyes slowly, as if afraid the night itself might punish her for looking up. I unlocked the door before I knew why. Cold air pushed into the kitchen the moment I cracked it open. She stayed on the welcome mat outside, as though crossing the threshold would break some rule she had promised herself she wouldn't break. I didn't mean to hurt your family, she whispered. Her voice was so thin it almost disappeared into the wind. For a moment I couldn't speak. My hands curled around the edge of the door, knuckles white. The porch light flickered above her, catching the raw red on her cheeks, the way she kept tugging her sleeves down as though hiding something beneath. Who are you? I finally asked. She shook her head, taking a step back. Please don't ask me that. Just listen. Her breath wavered. She stared past me into the kitchen, at the table where Liam usually finished his homework, at the empty mugs left from earlier, at the life she clearly knew from the outside but had never been invited into. Thunder murmured somewhere far off, the kind that rolls like a warning across fields. I shouldn't be here, she murmured. He'll be furious if he knows.
Scott? I asked. Her whole body flinched.
I hadn't touched her, but she recoiled as if I had placed a hand on a bruise. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator and the whistle of wind through the bare trees. You're the girl, I said finally. The one at the hotel. She lowered her gaze, shoulders caving inward. A tremor traveled through her fingers as though something inside her wanted to run but had nowhere left to go. I'm sorry, she said again. I never wanted to be part of any of this. I stepped aside slightly. Come inside. You're freezing. No, she backed away again, shaking her head hard. I can't. If anyone sees me here, if he finds out I spoke to you, he'll think I'm trying to ruin him. Ruin him? I echoed. He's the one. He was trying to protect someone, she interrupted, voice cracking at the edges. Something inside me went still, the way a pond freezes in one clear moment.
Protect someone.
Not himself. Not her. The air tightened between us.
Who?
I asked quietly. Her eyes lifted, finally meeting mine. They were ringed with exhaustion, so deep it looked bruised. I wish I could tell you, she whispered. I wish someone had told you before now. Her hands trembled again, and she tucked them behind her, as though hiding the part of her truth she still wasn't ready to show. "Did he hurt you?" I asked, softer now. "My husband did, he." She swallowed hard. "Not the way you think. Scott's not a monster. He carries things he shouldn't have to. And he puts them in the wrong places with the wrong people." Her words dangled like frayed thread, part truth and part apology. Lightning blinked across the sky, revealing how small she looked on my porch, like a child lost in someone else's storm. "Why did you ask my son if he was safe?" I asked quietly. She froze. Her breath hitched like a gasp swallowed too quickly. For a second she looked like she might run, but her knees didn't move. "He reminded me of someone," she said finally. "Someone I thought I could help once. Someone I couldn't save." "Save from what?" I asked. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they glistened in the porch light. "From the truth," she whispered. "And from the people who bury it." Fear pricked the back of my neck. She took another step back, the porch light dimming behind her. "I'm not the problem here," she said. "I know what it looks like, but I'm not the one you should be afraid of." "Then who?" I whispered. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes flicked to the driveway, as though expecting headlights to sweep across it. Her breath fogged in front of her, trembling. "I shouldn't be here," she said again. "But someone needed to warn you." "Warn me about what?" She shook her head fiercely. "He shouldn't have involved your son. He swore he wouldn't. He promised." She cut herself off, pressing her lips tight like she'd said too much. And just for a heartbeat, one fragile heartbeat, something flickered behind her expression. Not guilt.
Not shame. Grief.
She wrapped her arms around herself. Scott was trying to protect someone. And now I'm afraid he might lose everything because of it. The porch light buzzed again, and she stepped further into the shadows as though afraid someone might see her. "I have to go," she whispered. "Wait," I said, reaching out instinctively. She flinched but didn't run. "Are you in danger?" I asked. "Is that what this is?" Her voice trembled so quietly I barely heard her answer. "Aren't we all?" Then she turned and hurried down the path, shoes splashing through the wet leaves. She didn't look back. The night swallowed her quickly, leaving only the faint echo of her footsteps fading toward the road. I stood there long after she disappeared. The wind lifted the porch chimes, soft, uncertain, like someone brushing a fingertip along the edge of a glass. And for the first time since the hotel receipt fell into my hands, I realized I wasn't dealing with betrayal. I was dealing with something deeper, something layered, something buried. I closed the door gently, feeling the cold linger on my skin like a touch I couldn't explain. What was Scott protecting? And why did a trembling girl in the dark think it was already too late? The house was silent when I finally walked toward Scott's study. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that listens, the kind that waits. Scott had always kept the room neat, almost obsessively so. Papers exactly aligned, pens arranged by color, drawers that slid open without resistance. But the moment I stepped inside, I could feel it. The room was holding its breath. I ran my fingers gently along the edge of the desk. The wood felt colder than everything else in the house. Under my touch, a thin layer of dust lifted. He hadn't worked here in days. Not since the hotel. Not since the girl. A part of me wanted to retreat, to pretend I still lived in the version of my life that made sense. But another part, the part that had listened to Liam cry, the part that had watched a trembling young woman flee into the night, knew there was only one way through this. I opened the first drawer. Nothing unusual. The second, pens, receipts, the small useless things people keep to feel grounded. The third stuck slightly. My breath caught. Inside lay an envelope.
Thick. Heavy.
Soft at the edges as if carried too long in a pocket.
My name wasn't on it.
The girl's was. I sat down slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle around me. The envelope slid open with a softness that made me sick. Hospital forms, police notes, a counselor's card, all with dates that stretched back months. And in the middle, a photograph. Scott. And the girl. standing beside a building I didn't recognize. Her smile was tentative. His wasn't a smile at all, more like a grimace held in place by duty. On the back, someone had written a single sentence: "She deserves a safer place." I pressed the photo to my chest, not sure whether I was holding grief or relief or something nameless that lived between them. Scott hadn't been having an affair. He'd been hiding a runaway, protecting her. But from whom? My eyes drifted to the window. The night outside was motionless, but not peaceful, like something was watching from just beyond the reach of light. And suddenly the girl's words echoed in my head. He thought he could keep me hidden long enough for everything to settle. I folded the papers gently, as if they were fragile bones. The truth didn't clean the wound, but it changed its shape. Scott wasn't lying to betray me. He was lying because danger had a name, a face, a history. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling just enough to betray me. If someone was hunting that girl, and Scott had stepped between them, then the danger didn't end with her disappearance. It was already at our doorstep. Sky hadn't quite decided on morning yet. A faint blue washed over the yard, dim and trembling, as though the world itself wasn't ready to wake. I stood at the kitchen counter with a cup of lukewarm coffee when I heard the slow, dragging sound of the front door opening. Not cautious, not quiet, just tired, the kind of tired that sinks into bone. Scott stepped inside with his shoulders slumped forward, as if he were shielding himself from something only he could see. His coat was half-zipped, his boots streaked with mud, and his eyes, my God, his eyes, were rimmed in a redness I hadn't seen since the day his mother passed. He didn't notice me at first. He just closed the door behind him, leaning his forehead against its wooden frame like a man praying for it not to open again. I didn't speak. The kettle hadn't whistled yet, but I felt the house listening. When he finally lifted his head, his gaze found mine, and for a moment, something between us cracked. Not loudly, not violently, quietly, like frost breaking under a slow step. "What happened?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard. I shouldn't be here yet." Emotion gathered in the corners of his mouth, twisting his expression into something too raw to hide. And before I could reach for him, he sank into the nearest chair, rubbing his palm over his face, as though trying to wipe away the night itself. Outside, a bird gave a hesitant morning call, uncertain whether it was too early. Inside, the air thickened. I sat across from him, leaving space between us because I didn't know yet whether he needed comfort or confession. "Scott," I said gently, "look at me." He did, but only halfway. His eyes met mine, then darted away, as if afraid of what the truth would do when spoken aloud. "It wasn't what you think," he murmured. "It was never that." The hotel room, the girl, my name on the receipt, all the pieces I'd been trying not to arrange in my mind. They hovered in the air between us, heavy and trembling. "Then what was it?" I asked. He breathed in slowly, holding it as if the next words might cut him open. "Her name is Mara." The way he said it, soft, careful, made something shift inside me. Not jealousy, not anger, something quieter and harder to define. "She's the daughter of a woman I used to know," he continued. "Years ago. Before you and before everything settled." Rain began tapping the kitchen window, so lightly it sounded like fingertips. Scott looked toward the sound, then back at me, as if weighing how much truth he could carry at once. "Her mother was with a man she couldn't leave," he said. "A violent man. The kind of person who can make an entire room feel smaller just by breathing." He paused, letting the weight of that memory fill the space. "I tried to help her once, but I wasn't strong enough back then. I couldn't get her out. And when she died, Mara, she was just a kid, she disappeared. I didn't know where she went."
His voice faltered.
"But she found me a few weeks ago."
Scared.
Alone. Bruised. His shoulders shuddered. He found her again. The cold that had been gripping my spine tightened, but in a different way now. Less fear of betrayal, more fear of what had been happening in the shadows while I folded laundry and packed lunches and believed our family was an untouched, simple thing. "Why my name?" I asked quietly. He lifted his hands, palms open, empty. Because she needed protection. And because he knows my name, Nora. He watches everything I do. If she checked in with me, if she used my name, he shook his head. I thought yours would be safer. Yours isn't connected to him. The kettle finally whistled in the background, a sharp, sudden cry that made both of us flinch. I turned it off, letting the silence settle again. Hurt has its own temperature. Mine didn't burn. It chilled, slow and numbing, like winter settling into the corners of a house. But beneath the cold, another feeling stirred, fragile and trembling. You should have told me, I whispered. I'm your wife. I could have helped. He pressed his fingers to his forehead, voice breaking. I didn't want to drag you into danger. I didn't want him looking at you the way he looks at her. A pause bloomed between us, soft and uneven. Is she safe now? I asked. Scott's silence was long enough to answer for him. He clasped his hands together, knuckles whitening. I don't know, he said finally. She left before I could convince her to stay. She said she didn't want to put our family at risk. The house shifted, not physically, but emotionally, as though its walls were absorbing the truth. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the morning light creeping across the tiled floor in thin, cautious stripes. I thought of Liam, his nervous glances, his trembling hands when he said the girl looked tired, when he said she asked whether he was safe. And suddenly it all fit, but not neatly. Not easily. Like a puzzle someone had stepped on before finishing. She came here, I said softly. Last night. Scott's breath caught. She said she didn't mean to hurt us. I continued. Said you were trying to protect someone. He leaned back, eyes closing, grief and fear mixing into something fragile. Then he must be close, he murmured. Closer than I thought. A shadow passed across the window, as if someone walked by outside. We both turned, breath held, but the yard was empty except for the early morning fog drifting across the grass. Scott, I whispered. If she's still out there, alone, what happens next? He opened his eyes slowly, meeting mine, without looking away this time. There was no lie in them. No avoidance. Only the raw truth of a man who had tried to fix something broken long before he knew how to use his hands. We find her, he said. And we keep her safe, whatever it costs. Outside, the fog thickened, wrapping the house in a soft, trembling veil. But behind that veil, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was already watching, waiting. And the morning, still undecided, did not yet feel like safety. The porch was still warm from the afternoon sun when I stepped outside, though the sky had already traded its gold for lavender. The cicadas sang in long, tired waves, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, the house wasn't holding its breath. It exhaled, slow and relieved, like a body finally allowed to rest. Inside, Liam was laughing at something on the television, small, unguarded laughter that floated into the evening air. I sat on the porch swing, letting the sound wash over me. 4 days it had been swallowed by tension, by questions, by the quiet fear that comes when a family is stretched at the seams. Hearing it now felt like a blessing I'd forgotten how to ask for. The screen door creaked open behind me. It's a sound I've heard 1,000 times, but tonight it carried a softness I wasn't expecting. Mara stepped onto the porch, the red scarf folded neatly over her arms. She walked like someone still learning how to trust the ground beneath her, slow, careful, eyes darting toward shadows just to be sure they stayed where they belonged. I wanted to give this back, she whispered. She held out the scarf. Her fingers trembled, not from cold but from the kind of exhaustion that lingers long after danger passes. I took the scarf gently, the fabric lighter than I remembered. You could have kept it, I said. It looked better on you. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. It wasn't mine, she said. You gave it to me when you didn't have to. Kindness feels different when you're not used to it. She looked out toward the yard, where the last of the light settled on the grass like dust. I wanted you to know how much that meant. The porch swing rocked beneath me as I let her words settle. Sometimes gratitude sounds like confession. Sometimes confession sounds like a goodbye. You deserved safety, I said softly. Everyone does. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. A breeze drifted across the porch, brushing the scarf against my hands. I folded it over my lap, smoothing the edges like I had done with Liam's blankets when he was small. Is he gone? I asked quietly. I didn't have to say his name. We both felt the shadow of him even now. Mara nodded. The police said he won't be getting out any time soon. They're not letting this go. Her voice shook, but it held a strength I hadn't heard from her before. It's over. I wanted to believe her. I wanted those words to sink through my skin and root themselves in the bones beneath. But endings have never arrived neatly in my life. They always leave a thread loose, a question unanswered. I'm glad you're safe, I said, and I meant it. But safety is a fragile thing. It doesn't rebuild itself overnight. She turned toward the door. I should go. I just wanted you to know I'm okay. I reached out, touching her arm gently. You don't have to disappear, I said. Not anymore. Her eyes softened, and for the first time I saw something in them. Possibility. Maybe. Something like hope. Thank you, she whispered, and then she stepped back inside the house to say goodbye to Liam. When the door clicked shut behind her a few minutes later and her footsteps faded down the driveway, I leaned back against the porch swing and let the scarf warm my hands. It still carried the faintest scent of her shampoo, lavender, and something woodsy, like a tree trying to bloom in winter. Behind me, inside, Scott moved from room to room, closing drawers gently, not slamming anything the way he used to. His silence tonight wasn't avoidance. It was humility, a kind of opening. Earlier, when he told me the truth, every piece of it, I saw something in him break and something else form in its place. He had spent years trying to hold a world together with lies because he thought the truth would shatter us. But the lies were the heavier thing. They cracked him long before they reached me. Tonight, he kept glancing at me as if waiting for permission to speak, to sit beside me, to believe that forgiveness wasn't as impossible as he feared. I wasn't ready for answers yet, but I wasn't turning away either. The house had room for both truths. The porch swing creaked as I shifted, listening to the night settle across the yard. Fireflies lit the edges of the field, blinking like slow and uncertain stars. The woods beyond them were dark and quiet, the kind of quiet that finally felt like rest instead of threat. Liam stepped outside then, barefoot, carrying 2 mugs of warm tea he'd made himself. He handed one to me without speaking. His eyes, still soft from sleep, held none of the fear he'd been carrying. It feels better now, he said, curling beside me. Doesn't it? I nodded. It does. We sat like that for a long time, letting the swing drift us forward and back, as if the world had given us permission to breathe again. Inside, Scott turned off the lights one by one. In my lap, the red scarf glowed faintly in the last light. But beneath all that peace, beneath the new clarity, the soft apologies, the weary relief, one small question lingered quietly at the back of my mind, tapping like a finger against a closed door. If Scott hid this truth for so long, what else had he buried under the weight of trying to protect us? The night didn't answer, but it listened.